Hi, today we are going to present our topic oxygen released by garden plants in sprouts during photosynthesis. It is a specimen wise and a time wise comparative study which is done using combustion. It is done by Aishwarya Abhyankar, Trisha Belitkar, Gayatree Ghawate, and Manjiri Yadav. Each plant has its own capacity to produce or to give out oxygen. As we all know, photosynthesis is a process in which oxygen is produced and it is taken in or it is essential for combustion. We decided to devise a method in which we could compare the amount of oxygen produced using photosynthesis and combustion. We brainstormed various topics but found this to be the most handy to work out during the COVID 19 pandemic. So, for the experiment setup, we needed something which was closed but had input and output facilities. Now, to measure oxygen, our first thought was to use a chemical which would react with oxygen but not anything else, and also wouldn't harm the plant. Rusting was a process that we could have used, but it being a slow process, it was ruled out. Then we discovered devices like oximeters which we could use, but it was not our thought, so we decided to think of something else. And then we realized that we could use combustion. Next was our criteria to choose plants. We chose medium sized garden plants from different families for better comparison. While choosing sprouts, we wanted to experiment on the germination process. Due to the strict lockdown, we chose sprouts that were easily available in our kitchens. We chose tulsi, ova, mogra, aloe vera, common purslane, and pudina as our garden plants, and mohari, dhane, halif, moong, and matki for our germination experiments. Age and specimen were the criteria for observations. Now Manjiri will explain the experimentation.
Procedure. A test tube was taken, some soil and water was taken at the bottom of it. A tulsi sapling was taken and placed inside the tube. The test tube was closed with help of a cork and a bend tube. The bend tube was sealed with wax. The apparatus was kept in this way for about 24 hours. A bird feeder was then taken. A wax candle was fixed to its base inside and then lighted. The bend tube was inserted into the bird feeder and the bird feeder was sealed completely. The time required for the flame to extinguish was then measured. Now we can look at the images. At first we had taken a little bit grown plants and then we had germinated seeds.
We conducted the first experiment to compare the amount of oxygen released by selected garden plants over a time period of 24 hours. The common purslane is seen to be producing the most oxygen among considered plants, with tulsi following second. This is a deviation from the hypothesis where it was predicted that tulsi would yield better results. Also, the control is seen to contain the most amount of oxygen. Then we did the same experiment over a period of 72 hours. Here also the leader was the control, while the first among actual plants was the common purslane, but it was followed by ova and then tulsi. We conducted a third experiment to check the variation in the level of oxygen given out by a set of plants during different times of the day. From 8 to 9 am, which we called S1, 12 to 1 pm, which we called S2, 4 to 5 pm, S3, and 8 to 9 pm, S4. The experiment was conducted over 5 days and an average of the readings was taken. The common purslane shows a deviation from the trend as in S2 greater than S1. The trend is that in the case of the other plants, S2 is less than S1. The tulsi plant shows a different type of curve. Though the plants show their own respective different curves, we can say that the time t decreases from morning to night on average. Also, the curve for tulsi is characteristically different from others. This is a timeline graph of all the readings for the previous experiment that were taken from 14th March to 18th March. If we choose to ignore the sudden spike in the reading for tulsi, we can observe that common purslane has a consistently high reading.
So basically, this is the timeline graph of all of the readings that we took from the germination experiment. In this graph, we may see that there is a common pattern between the lines, or we can say that the lines are quite parallel with some minor variances. We can see that the common pattern is occurred due to the respiration of the plants. We can also see that the line representing the control has the least variance. This is the graph of the average readings of all plants. We can see that the mohri plant gives the most oxygen while the matki plant gives the least among these plants. cocoa peat doesn't have any microorganisms, whereas soil contains microorganisms which respire. Therefore, we think that the difference in control might be because in the case of plant control, it was cocoa peat and the sprouts had soil which contained microorganisms which respire. Thus, the difference in the amount of oxygen is observed. Concluded that the common purslane is the best oxygen giver for the 24 hours time period. In the next experiment, where we took 4 readings in a day, Tulsi is the best around 8 to 9 am. In the germination experiment, Mohari was the best oxygen giver. So, according to our discussion, some points are mentioned which affect the amount of oxygen. The first point says surface area of leaves and the number of leaves. The more the surface area, the more will be the stomata present, which is why the exchange of gases will also increase and therefore the amount of oxygen given out will also increase. Same thing with the number of leaves. The next point is the type of chlorophyll. If the chlorophyll absorbs large amount of radiant energy, then there will be more electron loss. So, to fulfill the electron loss, comparatively more photolysis will take place and therefore more oxygen will be released. The next point is the type of root. The amount of water absorbed by the root depends on the type of root. So, if more water is absorbed, more oxygen will be released when photolysis takes place. All of us learned the research methodology through this project. It was an enlightening experience and we would surely make use of this knowledge and experience in our lives. Thank you.